Dear colleagues, last time I was here at the stakeout. It was about the report by the Secretary-General on the inclusion of the Russian armed forces into the list of those who commit sexual crimes, and I commented on that. But when asked questions after it, somebody asked me about Bucha, and this is a right moment and opportunity to comment on this, because as I said last time, Minister Lavrov sent a letter to the Secretary General with 12 questions that we circulated before this takeout for you to understand what were the questions. And we received a letter from the chef de cabinet that accompanied the letter of the Secretary General about that was supposed to be a reply to the letter by the minister. As you know, the 3rd of April marked the 4th anniversary of the provocation in Bucha, an event which, as confirmed by numerous experts, bears all the hallmarks of a cynically staged fabrication. Russia has been accused of committing mass atrocities and war crimes by killing civilians in March 2022. Western governments and the media immediately put the blame on Russia, and the incident has become a backdrop and a watershed to the derailing of the Istanbul peace negotiations. That is why we have been trying to seek the truth since those days, because Bucha has become a kind of a symbol of Russian atrocities in Ukraine. Whether willingly or not, the Secretary General himself participated in this campaign. Unlike Western representatives, he is accountable to the whole international community. It was clear from the beginning that the whole plot was engineered by the Kiev regime with the support of Western intelligence agencies for political purposes. The bodies of civilians were deliberately arranged and scattered only after all Russian military personnel had withdrawn from Bucha. For nearly 4 days after the Russian troops withdrew from Bucha, as a goodwill gesture at the request of the Kiev authorities at that time, there was not a single mentioning of the dead people lying on the main street of that city. For 4 years now, we have been asking the Secretary General to assist in obtaining a list of victims of the staged incident. On May 1st, Minister Lavrov sent another letter to António Guterres regarding the provocation in Bucha, where he posed 12 questions. We've, as I said, distributed them to you ahead of time. Unfortunately, that was to no avail. More than a month later, on June 8th, we received one of those formal replies, which more resembled a mockery, frankly, at least to me. We've seen so many times before, which evidently did not provide substantive answers to the questions we have raised. Consistent with its continued practice of double standards, the UN Secretary-General once again limited himself to a standard formal response. The Secretary-General has not responded to any of the questions we raised. Instead, he assured us that Russia received no disparate treatment in relation to the request for judicial cooperation, and that the same legal framework was applied as in the case of any other member state. That assurance raises a very simple question. How can it be reconciled with the facts? Let's look at those facts. In its report on Bucha, the Human Rights Office relied on information provided by a Ukrainian state body, the main department of the national police in the Kiev region. The gravest allegations against the Russian Federation were supported by references to that body's Facebook posts. 2 of those references later became inaccessible. The remaining one, as we have already pointed out, does not substantiate the allegations in events. In other words, an unofficial, unverified, and partly vanished online source was considered sufficient for United Nations report containing extremely grave accusations against a member state. Yet, when the competent Russian authorities submitted an official request to verify the credibility, objectivity, underlying material used by the Human Rights Office, that request was refused and denied. So is this an equal treatment? The Secretary-General speaks of a legal framework applicable to all requests for judicial cooperation. The relevant framework is clear. Section 21 of Article 5 of the 1946 Convention on the Privileges and Immunities of the United Nations, it provides that the organization shall cooperate at all times with the appropriate authorities of member states to facilitate the proper administration of justice. This is not a matter of convenience, it is not a matter of political preference, it is a legal obligation. We know that the Secretariat is capable of cooperation when it chooses to cooperate. There are precedents where it went much further than anything Russia is requesting. In one recent case, at the request of Italian prosecutors, the organization even suspended the immunity of United Nations officials so that they could testify in a national investigation. Russia is asking nothing of that kind. We are not asking the United Nations to waive anyone's immunity. We are not asking it to disrupt its work. We are asking for access to the materials on which the Secretariat itself relied when it leveled grave accusations against the Russian Federation. As the member state targeted by those accusations, we have every right to verify the material, assess its credibility, and test its validity. But what legal framework was applied to Russia in practice? The Office of Legal Affairs asked the Human Rights Office whether sharing the information with Russia would be appropriate, and the Human Rights Office, the very office whose report methodology and sources are in question, said no. And that was the end of the matter. That is not a legal assessment. That is institutional self-protection. The same office that relied on weak, unverified, and inaccessible material is now allowed to shield that material from scrutiny. The same office that produced accusations is allowed to decide whether the accused state may examine the evidence. That is a conflict of interests dressed up as a procedure. The logic is upside down. An unverified Ukrainian source is good enough for accusations against Russia. However, an official Russian request to verify that source is rejected. Confidentiality is invoked not to protect justice, but to prevent scrutiny. And this is, again, not impartiality. This is not transparency. This is not the proper administration of justice. It is a selective treatment. It is institutional bias. It is discrimination, Mr. Secretary-General. No question has been answered out of 12 that were posed. Thank you.